Greetings and welcome to EHA Unplugged, the official podcast channel of the European Hematology Association, EHA.
Hello, welcome to this EHA Unplugged podcast. We are here today to discuss the promises and the challenges of academic and point-of-care CAR T-cell manufacturing. And our guest today is Anna Sureda, President of the EBMT, European Society for Blood and Marrow Transplantation. Anna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation and for the kind introduction. My name is Anna Sureda. I am a clinical hematologist, and I have been a clinical hematologist for the last 30 years or so. I'm the head of the clinical hematology department at the Catalan Institute of Oncology in Barcelona, Spain. And I have been the president of the EBMT, as you have mentioned, for the last 2 years.
Thank you very much for being with us today. So we wanted to speak about point-of-care CAR T-cell. As the data presented at the last EHA Congress in Madrid demonstrate, CAR T therapy is very effective and is steadily expanding both in target antigens and indication. However, CAR T cells have two big pitfalls. They have high costs and long turnaround times for production. And these two factors may reduce patient access to treatment because of economic issues or because of rapidly progressive disease. So my first question for you is, currently, Biopharma supplies the vast majority of CAR T products for patients. Do you think that CAR T cells produced in academic centers as opposed to commercial ones can help solve or alleviate these problems?
So thank you very much for the question. I think that you have basically touched the specific topics which are kind of the negative counterpart of the problems and the main issues associated to CAR T or to commercial CAR T nowadays. As you have said, they are really a very effective treatment strategies for some patients. They have demonstrated to be curative, but unfortunately, there are several issues that complicate a little bit their use from a practical point of view. First of all, they are expensive, and this is one thing that has to be taken into consideration. And second, there is a time interval that probably is too long nowadays, the manufacturing process. The cells have to be shipped somewhere around the world. In Europe nowadays, we have some manufacturing plants, but initially we had to send these products overseas and we had to send them to US. And this represents a very long period of time where these patients need to be maintained with a good disease control, let's put it this way, and with an adequate performance status. So, of course, there are many ways to try to solve that. And one of them is the potential use of what we are calling academic CAR T cells or point of cares. I want to say that, of course, these issues that I have mentioned significantly limit the accessibility of an otherwise curative treatment strategy for these patients. And when we go to big meetings, for instance, EHA or ASH or other meetings, we are talking about CAR T, but without recognizing or putting on the table these really severe limitations. So, as I have said before, academic CAR Ts can eventually modify this situation. First of all, CAR T cells can be produced near to the patient. So this time interval can be significantly decreased. The manufacturing time can be shorter than with commercial CAR T. So once again, we are decreasing this time interval. And of course, they are less expensive than commercial CAR T. And in this sense, they can be better affordable for, I would say that for every country, but above all for those countries that cannot afford paying for commercial CAR T-cell products. In addition to that, and I think that this is also important to mention, we know that commercial CAR Ts are focused in specific diseases in specific ages and in specific clinical situations, which is, I would say, that perfect. We are seeing an increasing number of indications in terms of disease stage, in terms of new diseases within and outside the hematology borders. But there are some niches that probably are not going to be addressed by commercial CAR-Ts. And academic CAR-Ts can eventually address these niches and, of course, can eventually give a potentially curative treatment option to those patients that have rare disease, rare conditions that are not being addressed by commercial CAR-Ts.
Do you want to give some examples of these diseases that are rare, maybe not very hot for commercial CAR-T, but where there is some promise in terms of results?
So, as you may know, Spain is one of the most, I would say, advanced countries in Europe regarding the CAR-T cell development. And here I think that we have to basically recognize the excellent and the fantastic work that has been done by the hospital clinic in Barcelona. They have been working for many, many years in academic CAR-Ts, and they have 2 autologous CAR-T cell constructs that, let's say, I think that they can be the example of what you have asked me. The first one is RA0001, which was the first one that was developed, that was basically looking at acute lymphoblastic leukemia, B-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia, relapse refractory. And you may remember, or everybody may remember, that the autologous anti-CD19 product for relapse refractory BALL from Novartis, Kymriah, was basically indicated and reimbursed for children and young adolescents or young adults. So RE001 was also used in adult patients with relapse refractory ALL that at this point in time also represented an unmet medical need. Nowadays, we have commercial products that are also addressing this specific group of patients, but at the beginning, this academic construct was able to fill in an unmet medical need with a group of patients that have really very bad prognosis. Additional examples with this same construct, B-cell malignancies that were quite infrequent. For instance, CLL at some point in time, and some B-cell malignancies that were not the focus of academic CAR-Ts, and that, this specific situation was also taken into consideration by the first construct. And if we go to the second one, which is an anti-BCMA construct, RA0002, which has been used for patients with multiple myeloma, the inclusion criteria in this program was wider than the inclusion criteria of the commercial product. So in this sense, it's not exactly that we were looking at rare indications, but more wide indications than the commercial products.
Thank you very much. And until now, we are discussing about the potential of academic CAR-T. But my question is also, what are the main problems linked to point-of-care manufacturing of CAR-T cells in academic centers? I guess there will be regulatory approvals needed, there will be expertise, facilities that need to be available. I guess there will be quality controls. These CAR-T cells need to comply, standardization. How complex is to make it in practice?
Well, the academic CAR-Ts, of course, they are associated to all these complexities, all the complexity of the process that commercial CAR-Ts are associated. So you need to have, first of all, a multidisciplinary team, not only from a clinical care point of view, but also in relation to the production. You have to have an expert team. You have to go through strict quality controls. And of course, there is a very, I would say, a strong and complex regulatory framework that, of course, will not allow every single unit or every single department to develop its own academic CAR-T. So it's not an easy process, and it needs knowledge. It needs multidisciplinary teams. It needs seniority. It needs all the quality control and all the regulatory issues. And it needs quite a lot of also economical investment, not because of the price of the product itself, that of course this has to be taken into consideration, but just as a starting point of all the process. So I think that there have to be many different actors and many different partners very well aligned to take forward CAR T-cell academic program and to give the possibility to this program to really reach the patients that would be potentially in need of.
Do you think the use of semi-automated manufacturing platform could help to overcome some of these issues? Can you shortly describe how they work?
Yes, I agree that probably the use. The issue is that the number of patients that are candidates to receive CAR-T is significantly increasing over time with new indications and with new diseases coming on board. The capacity of the devices that we are using nowadays is kind of limited, and it has to be done one process at a time. Talking about academic CAR-Ts, and the process is quite manual. So the possibility to use semi-automatic devices will first of all increase the rapidity of the process, allowing the production of constructs for more patients in a short period of time, and will also decrease the variability of the products, which is another important thing to take into consideration, because of course, when we talk about CAR-T, we are talking about one product which is being produced for a specific patient. And in this case, let's say in the way that CAR-Ts are being produced nowadays, there is a huge variability. These semi-automatic devices will be able to help on that too.
Coming to the European landscape, we are EHA, you are EBMT. What is the current situation for academic CAR-T manufacturing? How many centers are active in this? If there are centers active in this, can you give an overview?
Yes, I don't think I can tell you how many centers are active around Europe, but the reality is that in Europe, in this sense, has been kind of organized in different national networks. And here I want to mention, of course, the Spanish one. Here I have my own conflicts of interest. You have the network organized of ATMP centers in the Netherlands. You also have a network in Germany. You have a network in the Nordic countries that it's basically based in Sweden. Of course, we have a big academic program in UK, in London, basically led by UCM. So these networks are trying to work together to try to leverage as quickly as possible centers in terms of being able to produce academic CAR-Ts. The level of development of these different networks, it's not homogeneous, it's a little bit heterogeneous. I would say that the Spanish network is quite well developed, basically under the leadership of the program that I have already mentioned in Clinic Hospital. The Netherlands may be taking advantage that it's a kind of a small country and maybe it's easier to bring all the centers all together. have quite a strong network. And I want to mention here a prospective clinical trial, which I think that it's very interesting. It's looking at patients with diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, and these patients in third-line treatment strategy or plus, they are being randomized to receive an academic construct versus a commercial construct. And I think that this prospective clinical trial, at least as far as I know, it's quite unique because it's going to compare face-to-face a commercial construct with an academic construct in a non-inferiority design. And I think that the scientific community is very much interested in knowing the results. So I would say that in Europe, there are national networks that are actively working in trying to produce and to be able to use in big scales, let's put it this way, academic CAR-Ts, to try to fill in these spaces where commercial CAR-Ts can eventually not reach for several reasons.
Yeah, this was what I was thinking. You were mentioning these networks. So my question was, of course, point-of-care manufacturing will be always confined to high experienced top-level academic centers. So do you think it is conceivable in the future, in these networks you were mentioning, to have centralized academic CAR-T centers providing cells to products to a net of spoke centers, for example, in the framework of clinical trials, like is happening for high-level diagnostic procedures, for example, to imagine a network like this?
Yes, and in fact, this is the type of network that has been somewhat developed in Spain. So, for instance, if I look backwards and I see the development of the academic CAR-T program in hospital clinic, they started producing their, of course, the CAR-T cell, the autologous CAR-T cell constructs for their own patients, and all the patients were infused in their center. The next step was to establish a network of centers that were also of excellence, that were not producers, but they were able to infuse the product that was produced in hospital clinic to their patients. Of course, always taking into consideration all the quality controls from a clinical point of view, and basically with a very streamlined reporting to the national authorities on the clinical evaluation, the toxicity, and the efficacy of the product being infused outside the clinic hospital. And the next step is not only to have decentralized administration, but also decentralized production with different centers of excellence that can be producing the same product, once again, with a very clear and strong control of the product's characteristics, with all the quality controls being put in place, basically to increment the access of the autologous CAR-T cell products to many patients. So that could be one example that in some ways could eventually improve the accessibility of CAR-Ts from an academic point of view.
Thank you. And I have a last question for you. As president of the EBMT, how do you envisage the role of the EBMT in the development of non-commercial CAR-T products? There is a position of EBMT on this.
So that's a very good question. I think that EBMT is basically embracing nowadays not only stem cell transplantation, but other types of cellular therapies like CAR-T. As you may know, the EBMT registry received the positive opinion of EMA in February 2019, and the collection data form for cellular therapy of the EBMT registry was the one that, or is the one being used by pharmaceutical companies to report to EMA the post-authorization studies that need to be done following the European regulation in terms of efficacy and toxicity. In addition to that, EBMT is committed to equality and to diversity as much as possible, and this concept is included into this concept of making cellular therapies as much accessible as possible to, let's say, all the patients that are under the, let's put it this way, the EBMT umbrella. So in this sense, EBMT, of course, also tries to favor, let's say, from EBMT position. And we have to take into consideration that Europe is very diverse and Europe is not a unique country, so it's made out of different countries with different regulations. But of course, EBMT is basically embracing all these strategies that will increment the reach of an otherwise curative strategy for our patients.
Thank you very much, Anna, for this extremely interesting conversation. Thank you to everyone for listening to this podcast.